Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Why We Don't Hunt Demons, written by squigglestorystudios. Just as a quick note, I do stream every day at 9 a.m. GMT+1 on both Twitch and YouTube. If you have any questions, pop in and ask, and I'll do my best to answer. Anyways, on to the story. I sat and waited in the coffee shop and stared at my mediocre cup of joe. Very few diners, open at 3 a.m. in a bum feck nowhere, would have the facilities or the beams for a decent macchiato. But beggars cannot be choosers. I could go for Starbucks and get you something, Harry offered as he watched me stare at the cup. I scoffed. It is quite all right. It's not the best time for a milkshake, I quipped. Harry rolled his brown eyes. That was terrible, even for you, Derek. I shrugged and took a sip of the percolate, putting it immediately back onto the table. Not as terrible as this coffee, I murmured while Harry graduated from eye-rolling to complete shake of the head and a belligerent sigh, his dusty blonde hair falling out of place. Waiting for a guest unknown in the small diner is never quick or easy, while today's streets were safer overall than in years past. The chances of coming across a desperate meth head isn't something anyone is ready for, and unfortunately, in our line of work, recreational drug use was far too common in our clients. Sorting the regular hallucinations from the whispers of the possessed really is an art form than a science. Attention seekers don't like to inconvenience themselves this much to get the fix, and tweakers are easier to dismiss when they can't cause a scene without the threat of pissed-off authorities carrying them off or taking them out. I think this is them. Harry brought me back to my senses as a young man stood awkwardly at the door. I waved him over. David, I called out, giving my best smile. David stared like a deer in the headlights before quickly shuffling over in the booth, pulling up a hoodie over his face. Hey, anyone told you how to keep a low profile? He whispered harshly. The lone cook and waitress didn't even look up, but I bribed them, the secret organization money, to look the other way. I decided to turn up the charm. Why would we need to keep a low profile? We're not doing anything wrong. I held up my hand. Derek Shiravani of the Nephilim Project. David barely made eye contact as he shook my hand. Strong shake, aside from the quick release. And this is my assistant, Harry. Harry offered his own hand to David in a moment of youthful solidarity. I believe you two have conversed extensively over Reddit? Yeah, David muttered, shifting in his seat. This is the real deal, isn't it? You really from England just to see me? Of sorts, yes, I replied, reaching into my pockets. You're the best lead that we've had in this part of the country, and if you and your suspicions are correct, I can offer you a new and better life. I then retrieved a blood test from my pocket. All we need is a drop of blood, and we can narrow down the origins of your abilities. What? David exclaimed in a hushed whisper. A drop of my blood? That's some real serial killer-sounding crap. The blood test honestly looked a little hokey. Some small plastic packet with 2 clear chemical vials, a saline solution and an activator, some specialized litmus paper, and some extra sharp tweezers. The siding demonstration was going to be a better way of convincing David than trying to explain it. I took the saline drops and wet the paper before using the tweezers to cut the cuticle of my left thumb. Don't cut the palm of your hands, kids, before squeezing out a drop onto the paper. I then dosed the activator onto the paper, a good soaking, but I knew nothing was going to happen, so my paper remained red. I pushed the scent over to Harry. Your turn. Harry nipped the tip of his finger despite my demonstration from earlier and let his own blood stain the paper. I watched David, knowing what was going to happen next. As Harry applied the activator, his blood turned a pale shade of blue, and a small spark jumped from the paper, which was a nice touch, really. David's eyes stared at the paper, and I, as the responsible adult of the table, handed Harry a Band-Aid from the pack. Harry has a small amount of demonic blood, just like you, but he takes medication to control the more chaotic side of the unfortunate heritage. As Harry pushed the litmus paper over to David, he let the white of his eyes turn black, his brown irises glowing gold for an instant. David stared between Harry and the paper, snatching the tweezers without saying a word. I'd say he was a little too eager to draw his own blood. But for many, finding out that you were secretly a demon and not just crazy is the definition of escapist fantasy, and, If I'm going to be honest, I wanted to see how David's blood would react too. The young man went for a scab on the back of his hand and dabbed the paper onto the reopened wound before reaching for the activator. The paper just about exploded. Green sparks and smoke leapt from the page, and even I jumped to avoid the sparking my hair. Harry swatted the paper from David's hand and squashed the flames. Well, I cleared my throat. That's the strongest reaction I've seen in a while. So, am I a demon? David asked, halfway between excited and terrified. You were at least half of one, young man, which is truly saying something. I patted my coat pocket, reassuring myself that my cigarettes were still there, waiting for me. If we ever find your father, I need to interview him. David's expression turned dark, and I internally punched my own face for saying something so stupid. Staying awake till 3 a.m. was starting to get to me. When did I become so old? And then you're going to kill him, right? David glared me down. That's murder, David, Harry reminded our guest. But he was a monster. He fecked up my entire life, David growled. Yes, well, unfortunately, murdering a monster is still illegal, I retorted. This is bullshit. I thought you were going to help me hunt him down, David yelled, forgetting all pretense to stay quiet and unassuming. The lights in the diner began flickering on and off. The waitress and cook looked over wearily. Harry stood and left the table to approach the onlookers as I kept David's focus on myself. We are not hunters because we do not need to be. Demons are impulsive, violent, and unstable. I stood up and placed my hand on David's shoulder. Most of them end up in jail, high on whatever available or shot dead in some ditch. Even with all their powers, very few of them can survive the modern age. David's eyes were black. Green irises glowed in the dark behind the magic. I could see the fury and the pain. My own human eyes didn't look away. Even with all their powers and longevity, what have they done with such power? Nothing. David's fury halted, confused. I kept my voice low, calm, and importantly, kind. It was humans who built the pyramids, humans who eradicated smallpox, and who have walked on the moon. Electricity, the internet, the Louvre, the Hague, Sophia, the AK-47s, intercontinental missiles, and so on. So much more. All of it created without the terrifying powers of demons. I rested my second hand on his other shoulder, imparting the revelation my father passed on to me so many years ago. The demon side of you can do amazing things, David, but the human side of you can do anything. The light stopped flickering. David's outburst faded along with his black, demonic eyes. I released him from my grip and gave him a much-needed space. I won't force you to come with us, and we can't erase the pain that you have suffered, but we can ease your hardship and offer you a chance to have a better life. And you don't even have to see my smug face again if you don't want to. I offered, but the light jab at my expense wasn't enough to cut the tension. David looked at me, unsure whether they punch me or break down crying. Possibly both. I wouldn't have blamed him for either reaction. We can give you a couple days to think about it, Harry interjected. You can give us a DM when you're ready. David nodded and pulled his shoulder away from my hand, grabbed his bag and ran off into the night. Harry slumped back into the booth, looking at me like an idiot I am. You nearly lost him in that first half. You need a better opening, Derek. I know, I agreed, fishing out a cigarette from my pocket. It's been a while since I've had to make that speech. I'm a little rusty. A year and 2 months, really. But I still meant every word. I'll meet you back at the hotel. I need a moment, I said, waving the death stick between my fingers. Harry sighed and grabbed the rest of our things while I stepped out for a moment of reflection. My lit cigarette glowed gently in the dark of the alleyway. The smoke filled the air. As I let it and the frustrations escape me, I'd been there once, the anger and the drive to inflict the same pain I felt onto others responsible, and when that didn't work, I turned it on myself, hoping it would stop. In reality, a human like me had no chance against even a partially awoken half-blood demon, but it's not my duty to raise the sword. It is to offer the sanctuary so often denied to them, and the kind words they so desperately need to hear. We do not need to hunt demons, for we have already won. We only need to care for those left ruined in their wake. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.